Okay, gentlemen, now what I would like to do, I want to give you ample time for your closing remarks. And so we will begin with Professor Lennox. You may take 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, and then we will conclude with Professor Dawkins. He will have the last word.
Has science buried God? I think not. Science arose in the 16th and 17th centuries, a meteoric rise that historians of science have looked at and come to the conclusion that one of the main motors driving the rise of science was faith in God. So far from belief in God being a science stopper, it was the thing that caused science to rise in the first place, understandably so, because people had a basis for believing that the universe was rationally accessible, and so they could do their science, which is apparently one of the reasons given by Needham, the famous sinologist in Oxford, when he looked at China and asked the question, why did science not develop in this way in China? And in the end, although he was a Marxist, he came to the conclusion that it was because of the Christian background. So I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian. And I suppose that the major argument that points, doesn't prove, but points towards God is that this universe is a universe in which science can be done. The fact that the laws are there. Richard honestly says he doesn't know where they come from. They come from the logos, the mind that is behind this universe that has created it by his power and for his glory. And therefore doing science, like Galileo and Kepler suggested, doing mathematics, is to discover the secrets of the universe in the language in which God has written them. The other reason why I reject atheism as an explanation is it doesn't even, to my mind, begin to rise to account for the rationality which lies behind science. Also, I think that the Christian faith, which I unashamedly espouse, is not anti-scientific. And I would plead for the same attention to be paid to history as is paid to science itself. I find very unconvincing arguments that trip very lightly over things that historians do accept, which mean that we should take the scholarship that has to do with the existence and the resurrection of Christ very seriously indeed. The other big area, which we didn't discuss in great detail tonight, is that if science has buried God, it seems to me there's something else that lies before us, and that is, where are we going to get our morality from? Because Richard has written in one of his books that the universe is just like we'd expect to find it if at bottom there's no good, there's no evil, there's no justice. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. That seems to me to be a frightfully deterministic universe. And it troubles me to this extent, because it seems to me that on the one hand, the new atheists, of which Richard is a leader in the world, are trying in a way to hold on to the values that were given to them by Christianity, actually. And I would like to emphasize that, because in many of these books, nothing good is said about religion. But Jürgen Habermas, who's not a Christian, of course, recently said that the foundations of our legal system and our education and our morality in Europe are based on Christianity. Everything else is postmodern chatter. What worries me is this, that can you really retain these good moral values and espouse atheism? Hard atheists like Nietzsche and Camus would say you can't. Eventually it will lead to madness. And some people are suggesting that that is actually what's going to happen. And I have a question for Richard Dawkins. Is his world the world of Peter Singer, where in the end moral values get so eroded by a naturalistic framework that Peter Singer can say a newborn baby is of no more value than a pig or a dog or a chimpanzee? Is that the world to which the new atheism is leading us?
Peter Singer is one of the most moral people I know, and when he says something like that, it is based upon a very rigorous moral philosophic reasoning. He's interested in suffering, and his point is there that a newborn baby, or certainly a human fetus, may be less capable of suffering than, say, a full-grown pig. That seems to me to be an entirely rational point of view, at least an entirely defensible point of view. However, it was tossed in at the last minute, and I don't want to take all my time dealing with that. John, you quoted me as saying the universe has at bottom no good, no evil, and you said it has exactly the properties we'd expect if there was nothing there. You said that sounds horribly deterministic. Well, another way of putting that would be to say that the universe is horribly rational, horribly intelligible. And one of the main points you've been making is precisely that we live in an intelligible universe. And that's one of the things that we need to explain, and you think it needs a God in order to explain it. What I would like to know is, what would an unintelligible universe look like? How could any creature live as we live? How could any creature have evolved and survived in a universe that didn't have that kind of mathematical intelligibility? It's the anthropic principle again. Just as we could only be living in a universe that has stars, because you need stars to make molecules, so we could only have survived in a universe where there is rationality. I cannot conceive of what an irrational, unlawful universe would look like. Now, science doesn't know everything. So it's one of the glories of science that we know what we don't know, and we work on what we don't know, try to shrink what we don't know. It's hard work. We don't cop out by saying, oh, well, if you come to a difficult problem, magic must have done it, or God must have done it. No, we don't say that. We say, right, that's a problem to be solved. It may not be solved this century, it may be solved in the following century, or the one after that. But we don't just lie down and give up and say, oh, well, it must be magic because we don't yet understand it. I would hold up Darwin as a model for the whole of science, because before Darwin came along, the whole of life, the complexity of life, the beauty of life, the elegance of life, the apparent design of life looked like magic. And everybody thought it was magic. Everybody thought that God did it. It's so complicated, it's so elegant. Now, that was the really big problem. That was a far bigger problem than the problem of the origin of life, than the problem of the origin of the cosmos. Darwin solved that problem. All scientists now know that. Darwin solved that problem, and in so doing, he provided us with a sort of parable that don't even think about giving up, because if ever there was a time to have given up, it was in the case of biology, because biology really was a difficult problem, a hard problem. Darwin solved it. Now we have one or two other problems remaining, like the origin of life, like the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the laws of physics. No doubt that there are physicists here who can point to yet other ones. Darwin provides us with a lesson. It says, don't give up, because if Darwin could solve it for the really difficult problem, which was life, then we have every hope that science will solve it for the other problems in the end. And even if it doesn't, even if science doesn't solve all problems ever, that is still no grounds for saying, oh, well, magic did it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for providing us with a very elegant model for engaging on these very difficult issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking them.
Thanks, Richard.
I don't know about you, but I am exhausted. I have been riveted listening to the two of you, and now what we're going to do, we invite members of the media to retire to, I believe there's a room up here where these two men will meet with you briefly. We invite the rest of you to queue up if you'd like to buy a book and have it signed by the two of them. I don't think there will be time to have all books signed. Nonetheless, they will sign as many as they can before they go to another engagement. Thank you so much for coming.
I think it was really good how they really engaged with one another. So quite often with debates like this, you find like where there's not really a kind of clear conclusion, you find them kind of just discussing at each other, alongside each other, but they really engaged, which I thought was really good.
Well, I think it was really balanced. I honestly could say I don't think there was a winner in it. I thought they both brought really great arguments, and so, yeah.
I thought they both put forward their arguments very well, very coherent. They both respected one another, which is brilliant. And I mean, my mind was made up before, but I was open to suggestion. My view is still the same, fixed, and I just really enjoyed it.
With her, I think they were both pretty coherent. There were a few contradictions here and there from both sides, but on the whole it was a very good debate, and both sides of the argument I felt were put forward in the strongest way they could have been.
What I found interesting was that actually, despite all these kind of scientific arguments, a lot of it comes down to like whether Jesus existed or not. And actually, I found it interesting how Dawkins went, okay, Jesus did exist. Like that's quite a retreat from his previous position, you know. So I think that's quite significant in itself that he said that.
I think it went well. I think it was great that they both had a good opportunity to talk, but I do think that from my perspective that we have to look at who Jesus is and look at the resurrection in order to really be able to think, is there a God out there?
Fairly convinced of Dawkins' view, but tonight helped to confirm it. So.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining as well. I was a bit disappointed by the arguments that Lennox put forward, because I was hoping for something a bit more challenging from the Christian perspective, since a lot of his arguments I've seen elsewhere that have been refuted and things. And I thought they both were a bit too polite maybe, and didn't really sort of get down to it. But it's still really entertaining, and it was great to see Dawkins, especially now he's such a big sort of TV personality.
I think John Lennox really had a very good answer, very strong message, based in lots of truth and facts, and I think that he came over as the more authoritative person this evening. Really enjoyed it.
I think absolutely you need to discuss this kind of thing, because if you don't, you need to think about these things to stop you getting lax in your own views. I mean that works on both sides. I think you can't just go around taking a stance but not thinking it through properly, and that works whether you're coming from a religious perspective or an irreligious one. You have to back up what you say with evidence and things that you've actually thought about. So.
Either God exists or he doesn't, and I agree with you about that. The great thing about the two of us is that we can at least talk, because neither of us is a postmodern relativist. Isn't that right? Say that again. We do. Well, I'll say it again, just see that we agree about something, but it's actually a very important something.
I guess what I really wanted to ask you is, have you ever in your life, ever once, just wanted to actually think it would be great if there was a God?
Maybe I have, but if I have, so what? Doesn't make it true.
No.
I mean, that's what matters, isn't it?
I